Good morning, campers. Welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson Read-Along podcast. I am your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week, we read Chapter 16 of Percy Jackson's Sea of Monsters. I go down with the ship.
It's a pretty literal one this time.
Really? I was thinking, oh no, is this supposed to be more like, are we falling into the relationships? Is this what Rick Riordan had planned? This is where everyone starts to fall in love with each other. I have to go down with this ship one way or another.
When this was written, was that even really a popular phrase, actually? I don't know when that...
I'm sure in some circles it was, but most of the time, I think, because ship is just the shortened version of relationship, it's most like, when are these people going to get together? In a sense, if we look at sitcoms from the 90s, I'm thinking that's where it really started to go, was when people when are they going to get together, in Moonlighting. That's more 80s, but
No, yeah, I'm sure that phrase had been around for a while. I just think of it in terms of I don't know, when it, LiveJournal maybe was when it started to be a thing, but it was probably other words that people used too, because fandom hasn't always used the same words.
B, I really wish we had someone that was a fandom expert, that could, a linguist. It's this is when they really started using this. I'm sure those people exist.
I bet Sarah would know. This seems like something that she would have in her wheelhouse of stuff that just exists in her brain. We did have an extensive conversation about Harry Potter podcast yesterday, which was funny.
I mean, that would be something that would be up Sarah's alley. I'm actually really curious when that became a thing. I'm sure it was attributed a lot towards text speak and having shortening versions of things.
But people have been doing that forever. But it doesn't refer to relationships in this case. Thank goodness.
No, because literally Percy Jackson goes down with the ship.
That kind of describes what happens. In a way, I'm always surprised when the chapter actually is just a literal title of what happens, because it kind of, in some way, gives away the plot. That's the essence of what happens. There's other stuff, obviously, but basically the ship sinks. That's, the main thing that happens. Oh, well, I guess also they escape from the island, but that's implied.
Well, when it comes to chapter titles, yes, it's a literal chapter thing, but it's what is that supposed to mean? Because Percy Jackson, nautical sea boy, can, survive underwater? Does it mean that he goes down with the ship? Or because a lot of the times these chapters are in a very first person, almost third person perspective at times, and having does just Percy Jackson go down with the ship, or does everyone go down with the ship? That's kind of the drama is, wait, Percy can breathe underwater, but everyone else can't.
Yeah, well, Tyson can, right? Can he?
I'd hope he does. I hope Tyson knows how to breathe underwater. That would be really obnoxious if he didn't.
Yeah, we've shown that he's not exactly all things equal under Sons of Poseidon. Some of them are treated a little bit differently depending on if they're a monster or a demigod. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he has, water-related powers. At least he's able to communicate with, what's her name? Rainbow the
hippocampus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have Rainbow the majestic hippocampus.
Yeah, I so called that she would make an appearance again. I know that she already saved Tyson, technically, so that could have counted. But I just knew that, in a time of trouble, they would call upon Rainbow, and she would appear through the waves with her gaggle of other seahorses and save them when they're most needed. I'm not upset about it.
Reach for the sky, bullseye. Yeah.
They just sort of whistle and she appears.
Yeah, that's what the great thing about this chapter is, when you have through lines when it comes to books or anything. A lot of I'm going to use sitcoms for this example. Is a lot of sitcoms don't have a thing called through lines where they have a plot element that goes through all the way, such as each episode is supposed to be self-contained. Whereas here, the through line is obviously with Tyson and Rainbow. Rainbow comes back in other chapters rather than it's a one-off thing.
Yeah, it's not just a joke. It comes into play with the plot.
No, because there's a lot of, I'll use an example. When I was staying at your house, you can attest for this. All I did was watch The Office.
Yeah.
And The Office is one of the rare sitcoms that actually has a through line to it, where things from previous episodes will carry over.
Things actually pay off. It's not just this endless sort of you start from the beginning in every chapter kind of thing, which is good. I like that. I like that there's a consistent characterization of Tyson. I feel he's very well-rounded and fleshed out as a character. Like, I can expect for him to behave a certain way, and there's always like sort of a justification for why he does things. Like, it makes sense that he wouldn't be taken in by like the thrall of Polyphemus, like saying like, oh well, you're also a son of Poseidon and you're treated differently, so you should join me, you're a traitor to all of the Cyclopses. Like, you know that he would never fall for that because it's been established that he's incredibly loyal throughout the book. Like, from the very beginning, he's even loyal to Percy when he doesn't know that he's his half-brother or whatever you want to call him.
Well, no, that's because, again, that's the idea of Percy Jackson's good to everyone until they piss him off. And that is, with Tyson, like, he became Tyson's first friend. And that's kind of a huge thing of having, like, if you ever have, like, a first friend, you're, like, extremely loyal to them to the bitter end.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see that, like, he's grateful that Percy gives him the time of day in some ways, which is kind of sad, but he's also just inherently a selfless character. That's why he sort of sacrifices himself, so to speak, earlier in the book when you think that he died. Well, I didn't think he died, but you know what I mean. Like, he's always doing these selfless things.
I mean, to like a 4 to like 12-year-old, I'm sure they would have thought that Tyson's dead because it's like, well, it happened. And a lot of the times you don't really think like, oh, he's a son of Poseidon. Obviously, he could survive underwater and do all these things. But like in that situation while you're reading it, you forget like a lot of that stuff because the action and the tension happens, and you really, even like me reading this over and over again, finally realizing, oh wait, he's the son of Poseidon. There's no danger because, again, remember we talked about last week as well, there's no danger in Tyson dying because technically he is a monster, so he technically wouldn't die, he would just reform. So you forget all this stuff, which is a very clever thing to have in the chapter, is you take a character like Tyson who pretty much will live forever, and you put him in these stakes where you have like the melodramatic thing of Tyson, don't go in there, it's dangerous, you're going to incinerate and explode. We already know that he's impervious to fire, and you have all these things. As a reader, you keep forgetting all this stuff, so in your brain, this tension, almost like the melodramaticness of your brain is just like, oh my god, this is super sad, I'm gonna start like crying and stuff. And then you have the big shock at the end with having Tyson coming up out of the water and saving everybody, which is really cool.
The reason that one would forget that is because the other characters kind of forget about it. Like, there's the weight given to the fake out death of Tyson comes from the fact that Percy kind of believes it, and then also that adds more drama later on in this chapter where he's more protective of him.
Well, also Percy believes it because he's also kind of like, he is the audience character, so if Percy believes it, the audience would believe it as well.
He's also a bit more naive than a lot of the other characters, but there's also this aspect of like, Tyson almost dies technically, like he wasn't ever really in any danger because of, like we said, he has these powers to withstand drowning, and he summons Rainbow because he is good at making friends with animals. Like, there's a bunch of reasons why he's able to survive the first fake out death thing, but then it's still infused with like a certain level of drama that Percy is protective of Tyson because of the fake out death of him thinking that he was gone, and like this like roller coaster of emotion he went on of like, you know, being friends with Tyson, finding out he was his brother, being kind of ashamed he was his brother because of all the implications of having a quote unquote monster as a half brother. And at camp they were sort of marginalized, and especially with Tantalus, like, you know, joking about how monstrous Tyson was and Annabeth and all of that, but still Percy's protective because he's like, oh, I almost lost him because I finally got close to him and learned to accept him as my brother, and then I lost him and I can't lose him again. And that works really well in this chapter because you really feel that sense of like, I can't risk it again losing this brother that I've kind of pushed away and then learned to care for.
Well, I mean, that's what in the business we call a character arc, of having Percy Jackson again have the idea of, you know, he doesn't care about Tyson in the beginning, and then as the story progresses, we have Tyson like kind of be pushed away by Percy because it's almost like having an embarrassment of having an older brother or someone that's like, you know, has like, you know, these special needs. Because it's a lot of those like feelings and thoughts of like going through school actually and having those. It's like, oh man, I have a brother that has this type of special needs. I'm kind of embarrassed. But you kind of realize through the course of growing up, as Percy has done, that wait, no, Tyson doesn't really have these special needs. He actually is his own person. We're just kind of in our brain thinking, oh, because he's not that smart, he's kind of slow, he has all these things, that he's not someone that's super strong. Like, we have to protect him from the world, rather than Tyson's just a regular person that just wants to get by. And all he wants to do in the end is be loved, much like Frankenstein's monster, or like many like characters that just really just need love and embrace rather than just being protected or shunned.
Well, I think I mentioned this last chapter that Tyson definitely follows like the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer model, where at first he's seen as different and then he's shunned for it, but then his differences become his strengths, which I have mixed feelings about that, because that could sometimes be like, the only time you should accept difference is when it's convenient to you. But when used the right way, it's sort of like showing that he has strengths that other people don't have because he's different, and that definitely comes into play in this chapter, where he's stronger than them. He's able to sort of get closer to Polyphemus because Polyphemus is trying to like lure him in, and it actually like works in his favor.
So in this situation, I understand what you're saying about like having these situations where, okay, he's useless until right when you need him, when he's on Cyclops Island. But I mean, I'm looking at this as well as, even without that situation, Tyson has helped previously in other situations, even if it's inadvertently. This is just where like he's at his prime.
Oh, I mean, I'm not complaining about the Mary Sue-ness of Tyson at all. Like, I don't think that he's a Mary Sue, because I think it makes sense. Like, we've talked about this, that it makes sense why he would be good at what he does, specifically within the context of an island that has a Cyclops on it. But I'm more just talking about like this very specific, like I said, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, like this idea that his difference was shunned, especially by people like Annabeth, until that difference became convenient. Like, the only reason, like, oh, well, I accept you now because of the very fact that you're a Cyclops, is how we were able to escape certain death, which I don't actually think the story does. It's way more subtle than that, and it shows that it's not so much saying, oh, you should only care about people who are different if they're useful, and it's more like people who are different can be useful, and just because you have this certain idea of like what is the best way to be a person doesn't mean that's necessarily true. And I like that lesson, which I think is almost the thesis of Percy Jackson to some extent, right? Because he has ADHD and dyslexia, then he ends up being a demigod. It's this idea that your differences it's sort of arbitrary, the construction of what the perfect person is. Like, the idea of ability and disability comes from like this societal made up thing that the world is structured around people with certain abilities, but that doesn't mean other people with different abilities aren't equally as good.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying when it comes to this. I'm thinking a lot of the scene in Rain Man with when he goes to play poker.
Yeah. I mean, well, Rain Man has been, some people aren't super thrilled with the representation in that, but I mean, it is of a different time too. But yeah,
well, it is of a different time, but also it's much of the time of when it was written and when it was shot. That was the 90s. This is 2018, but it's like that type of situation of having what was it, Tom Cruise and his brother, and it's like, oh, we need to make all this money, so he uses Rain Man to like win all this money from poker so he can start his new life. It's like, that's like the worst example of having like having like a disability, having something that's a bad example.
Even the narrative though kind of condemns him in that, if I remember correctly, because it's sort of shown as like a mean thing to do, to exploit someone with different abilities to try and like, for your own selfish gain, which I don't think is what's happening in this story.
No, and I know that's not happening. That's why
it's
book.
like
but it's like
contrast.
there's two ways of like looking at this when it comes to like writing a character with disabilities. It's either they're good at everything in that situation, or it's like they're good at some things and they still need the help of other people to accomplish some tasks. But then in the end of the day, they're still the same people.
They don't fall into like weird I think like the magical disabled person who teaches people a lesson is definitely like a thing that exists, Yeah, like the movie Radio and like other.
Yeah, that's very like, was it like message of the week type of PSA, which can easily happen.
Yeah, there and obviously magic exists in this world, so I'm not saying that like I'm not talking about literal magic. I'm more just saying like this weird. I mean, it happens too with like other races too, where it's just like, oh, Freaky Friday, the Asian woman, she's magical because she's different from us, and that's how she understands the curse that swapped our body. Like I don't know, it's weird this like othering of certain people.
Well, that one's more like the idea of old-timey racism of having like mysticism from the East.
But it's like it's a similar thing where it's like, oh, the only reason I appreciate people who are different than me is because they have this magical insight. Like there's
Okay, so
yeah, it's.
Did you ever watch? Okay, have you seen the new Predator movie?
I haven't seen any of the Predator movies.
So do you know the plot of that movie?
Not at all.
Because it's so ridiculously stupid that it's stupid. And it's very similar. I can actually use it in this conversation, and I don't really care if I spoil it. Do you want to know the plot of that movie?
I truly do not care what happens.
So I'm warning all of our audience.
I mean, I don't care.
I'm going to spoil this. It's a new movie. So the Predator comes down because they come and like they try to steal the best genetic traits from people, so they can make themselves bigger, badder, more badass.
Okay.
In this movie, the Predator comes down, the super Predator, to steal a kid's autism.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh wait, I think I heard of this. I think I listened to a podcast that talked about this.
But yeah, so there's situations where it's the idea of like having like, oh, we can have these disabilities, but really they're superpowers. So it's like the next stage of genetic evolution is, oh, people with autism have all these superpowers.
Right. That's a thing that people actually think. Like there's like the concept of like indigo children and other things like that, where people try to like weirdly compartmentalize what disability means and try to make it like, oh, so you're special, so you have things that could help us in some way, you have insight that's different. And it's a very difficult line to walk, where you have to express that people with disabilities or people who are different have maybe like capabilities that are different but just as good, without like fully veering into the like they're amazing in every possible way. And that's why I think Tyson's characterization is well-rounded, because it shows that he has different capabilities than the other like children of the gods, but he also has failings, and not in a way that's just like, Tyson, you always mess up because you're a Cyclops. It's more just like, oh, well, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and we help each other. Like Tyson, works together with Percy to trick Polyphemus. It's the two of them together that eventually helps them get off the island and trick him into the, we'll get into the plot of it. It's the both of them working together. There isn't like a hierarchy of one being better than the other, or like, oh, all of a sudden the magic disabled person swoops in. It's really interesting actually that the semester that I took my children's literature class in college, I also took a class on disability in fiction. And there's a very long history of really bad representation of disabled people in fiction. It's a mess.
I mean, for like a short chapter, we could easily like talk about this subject, because when you have like it's almost like a trope of having like the blind man who's magically good at swordsmanship.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a huge quintessential fantasy trope, is having someone that's, oh, he's lost his sight or he's lost an ability such as like a hand or something. You have to compensate for it. Oh man, yes, I consider it is a bad trope, but like to certain circumstances,
it has to be delicately done.
When it comes to like kids books, there's a lot of like, there's like a wavering line of just having, you can either get super technical or you can just have it, they have some disability and that's all you need to know, and you go from there, and you have like a very like clinical definition of it, of just having like, you stop like, hey, this kid has autism, and then you just the characters normally like move on. Here in Percy Jackson's kind of explained much better, because it's actually like a kid explaining to another kid like what, like let's just say what ADHD is and what dyslexia is, and I really enjoy that about Percy Jackson, rather than a lot of books that deal with autism or deal with things in like the mental capacity form of things, of just having, we're just going to give the clinical definition from a kid to explain, rather than having like a kid explaining to another kid. Because I think when you have that, you actually benefit more of explaining to a kid kind of like, oh, people are different in these ways, rather than, okay, we're going to explain it clinically so no one's going to understand what the F you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean it's more personalized. Um, I'm glad that Rick Riordan definitely has like a presence of mind when he's writing, that there are different sorts of people who might be reading his book.
Yeah, and it becomes more apparent as the books go on because there are other things that come into play. Like we've talked about it before, like there's like non-binary characters, there's characters of different races, different religions, different ideologies that come into play. And the one great thing about Rick Riordan is that he doesn't pander to his audience all that much when it comes to his books. Like he doesn't just check off like a box. Like I've read other book series. I'm going to name. There's this one book called Asylum, which I think I've talked about this before, but it's the one book that I like actually buried because of how terrible it was.
You buried it?
It's in my backyard right now because it was like so pandery.
You
like there was a
buried
gay
it?
character in the book. Yeah, no, I'm going to explain. Like there's a gay character in the book, and everything that comes out of his mouth is, "Hey guys, I'm gay."
It's like a stereotype, like really bad. I mean,
it's like really, really like it's to the point of being insulting. It's like I don't even want to read this book anymore.
I think the main reason why YA and books in general are getting better at representation has a lot to do with like hashtag own voices, like people who actually are of these different groups writing about their own experience. So it's not just like some weird like clinical view of people who are different. It's actually people who are different who are speaking from their own lives. And Rick Riordan, even though he's not necessarily someone who knows what it's like to have a disability or whatever, it definitely comes through that he knows people who have ADHD, who have autism, who he like thinks about these things. I mean, he even said like the reason he put like a genderqueer character in his books is because he knew a student who was. So it's this idea that like he sees real people who then are reflected in fiction, because that's what fiction should be. Even if it's fantasy, it should have an acknowledgement of the fact that magic kids aren't all just a white like neurotypical child. Like that is kind of insulting to other kids who might want to read these books. They want to see themselves in these magical worlds. They want to imagine, oh, maybe I can go to Camp Half-Blood and I can be a demigod, just like how kids want to imagine that they one day will get their Hogwarts letter or whatever. Yeah, I can sense Rick Riordan's commitment to representation comes from knowing a diverse group of people, and also he shows that through his characters and through the fact that he's provided like the Rick Riordan Presents thing of like, oh, I personally feel like I can't do this story justice that speaks to the experience of someone of a different race than me or someone of a different gender than me, and then he outsources that. I think that's a humble thing that more people should do, is admit that they might not be able to truly speak to the experience of those who are different than them.
I'm sure a lot of it has to deal with a lot of the fans want, hey, Rick Riordan, write something about Mayan culture. Hey, Rick Riordan, write something about Korean culture. Write something about all these things. And he's just like, well, I can't really do all this because that would mean I'd have to like study years and years and years, rather than there's people that are probably more qualified to do it right now who want to write books, who want to have all these chances. I'll give it to them. All I know is Greek, Roman, maybe Norse, maybe Egyptian culture, and I'll do that because those are my fields that I'm comfortable with doing. And I like that a lot about it, rather than just, hey, I'm going to spend like 3 years like researching and then getting things wrong or making like a pandering thing. You have Rick Riordan Presents, which is I'd say a very noble thing to do, rather than just, I'm the mythology guy, I'm going to do all of this stuff. I think having that's like stepping down a little bit so he can focus on his own things is really important.
The J.K. Rowling thing of being like, oh, I am the arbiter of canon. I am the person who creates the things, and I must be the one who writes it. And at a certain point, you should admit your limitations. Admit that you aren't the expert on everything. And that's maybe the best thing about Rick Riordan, is that he doesn't claim to know everything.
No, because if you claim to know everything, that means you know nothing, because there's like, even like when it comes to me, like I never claim to be a master of anything, because there's always going to be either someone that's better at doing something than I am, or like there's people that are more adaptive, rather than if you say you're the master of something, you kind of like close your mind off a little bit and you don't want to like progress. Like everything's good the way it is. I'm the master of it and that my way is the goes. And that's kind of like when it comes to like writing books, like writing books is really hard and like you learn new things every time you write, as well as when it comes to like Rick Riordan. I'm sure he learned so much like writing Greek mythology and all these other series, especially like writing children characters, because you have, we can even like look at this chapter and having, I was reading a little bit of Magnus Chase while I was on the plane coming home, and him writing fight scenes are much different than starting off with here and having like, it's like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I don't know. It's just like, Tyson, we need your help defeating Polyphemus, rather than in Magnus Chase. I'm going to start using these examples now, is that it's like they're more clear, they're more concise, he gets to the point more, rather than having like this huge bloated like exposition dumps of like, I was in this position and I fought him this way, which is very helpful. Like it's a person that's like learned his craft, especially when it comes to fight scenes. Like we're trying to like tiptoe over this chapter a little bit, but it's like 8 pages.
Yeah, it's a pretty short chapter.
It's pretty much, if you want me to sum up this chapter, they fight. Yeah, then is that pretty much it? Like there you go. Have fun with this episode. But it's like you're trying to find like the huge human aspects of this chapter is kind of like, we have the drama of having Annabeth. She's still like mortally wounded and she's just covered in the good old Golden Fleece. We have Percy and good old Polyphemus and Tyson kind of like duking it out, which is really interesting because you have these 3 sons fighting each other, which you don't really think about, but it's kind of like a sibling dispute because it's like, well, it's my fleece, and Percy's like, we kind of need it, and Tyson is kind of like the neutral party in this aspect of he's gone on the quest, but it's like, here's the time where you could have the really melodramatic thing of, we're going to have the twist where Tyson turns evil, and having the worst trope, which I hate in every book that I read, which is you know what I hate this trope so much to my dying breath. Do you know what the trope I hate the most is?
Wait, so is it like when a villain is like, join me? Do you hate that? Because that's kind of what happens in this.
Oh, no. So that's not it. The one that I hate is, but you're my kind. And like, you're a Cyclops. You can't turn your back on Cyclopses. I hate this trope. God, I just hate it.
It actually happened in Halloween Town when we were watching it the other day.
I mean, even when we were watching Halloween Town, well, me and Sarah were drinking giggle water. We were like, I hate this trope because it's so overused, and it's like, it's pretty much like, well, that's gonna happen, such as like in Avatar. Yes, even The Last Airbender, but Jim Cameron's Avatar, it's like, well, you're our race and you can't turn against us. It's like, oh god, it's like one of the worst, oldest tropes you could possibly have, because it's like, it's gonna happen this way, this, that, blah 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 blah. I hate it just because it's kind of like, was it like a straw man type of approach of just having, because you know our struggles, our like tribulations, all of our like struggles. You need to join us, and Tyson's just like, no.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what happens in that like monologue in Halloween Town when like Calabar is just like, you're warlocks and witches, so surely you would want to turn against the mortal kind or whatever. Like, it's actually super similar to like the Luke perspective in Percy Jackson, where he's just like, oh, we've been done wrong so much by the humans and by the gods, and we will rebel, whatever. Like, it's like a similar kind of thing, like, why wouldn't you join my side? Harry Potter too, actually, where it's just like, oh, well, the wizards are better
so
than...
in Harry Potter it's a little different, even though it is a trope. You have Harry Potter, which is, I'm not going to judge around this and say like, oh, Harry Potter is like a full-blooded wizard. You could have easily have had the story like, oh, Harry Potter's half human, half wizard. But they didn't do that. They did that with Hermione, who was obviously the smarter person.
Yeah.
You have that situation of Percy doesn't have to experience it. He's witnessing it. So it's kind of like, as the audience, you witness what racism is.
Yeah.
In Percy Jackson, in this situation, you have the idea of Polyphemus has been mistreated his entire life. Like, he's blinded. He's got these terrible like cataracts in his eye, all because of a human, and because Tyson's turning on another Cyclops. It's almost like, I don't know. I know there's ways like of saying it, but it's like Tyson has become very docile and loves humans, That's what kind of like in Polyphemus's eyes is kind of like he's like, oh, you're a slave to the humans almost.
It's interesting because I could kind of see where Polyphemus is coming from, because Tyson is mistreated a lot by the demigods, and they treat him as different, and they kind of marginalized him in ways that are really unfair, because he's only ever been incredibly kind and helpful. Or, I mean, sometimes he's messed things up, but like everyone does, but no one blames being the fact that people are demigods when they mess up, but they blame the fact that he's a Cyclops every time he makes a mistake. So that's the difference.
But the difference, though, when it comes to this is that Tyson, even though, yes, he's been mistreated, he's been more or less has seen the kindness of people. Like, a lot of people, even in Camp Half-Blood, not everyone mistreats him. It's only Annabeth, really, and maybe Tantalus. Like, there's Beckendorf, and, like, there's a bunch of, like, Hermes' cabin, as well as, all the other cabins. Like, a lot of them don't mistreat Tyson, rather than you have Polyphemus, who's been mistreated all of his life.
Well, the Polyphemus thing comes from, like, the generalization of the demigods. Like, they're not a monolith. Like, some of them are nicer than others to Tyson. So the problem isn't the demigods. The problem is, like, the culture around certain demigods, and that they act superior to the monsters and
that's
whatever.
Because in their mind, because you have the big three, such as Poseidon, Hades, and Zeus, and in their minds, they are the three greatest beings, so obviously their children are going to think the exact same way, rather than you have more of the down-to-earth, almost like Hufflepuff cabin of having like Hermes, or having Apollo, or having any of those, where it's just, they're more down-to-earth. You can only imagine what it's like to be like a son or daughter of Dionysus, and just like, yeah, we're the party god, like we drink wine all day and do all these things.
Yeah, well, Mr. D is also kind of terrible, but
well, that would be awful too, but I'm just saying it's like, but then you have like Percy Jackson, who is the titular character, and even he kind of gets a big head a little bit when it comes to like,
yeah,
I'm the son of Poseidon, I have all these powers, compared to like having other demigods who don't have as many magical powers, because Percy Jackson has super strength, he has super healing, he has all these things that I'm sure most minor gods don't have.
I mean, the funny thing that he has to reckon with, though, is that he's acted so superior because he's a part of the big three, and he's adjusted to the life of being a demigod, not like in the first book where he just sort of is so thankful to even find a place where he fits in. Now he's like, definitely like chosen one syndrome of being like, oh, well, I'm, one of the heroes of last summer.
You know what the irony of this is, right?
What?
The situation is, it's three brothers, so you have the idea of Percy Jackson's kind of like on the pedestal, whereas Polyphemus is a son of Poseidon, and Tyson's also a son of Poseidon. And you kind of see the different, like, you have the idea of Polyphemus is trying to curse Percy. Like, Father, I want you to curse this person, and he's not going to curse Percy because he favors Percy the most out of all his kids.
And then Percy says, oh, he doesn't play favorites, actually.
Oh, he most certainly does play favorites. That's not true. Percy's just an idiot.
Poseidon won't curse me, I said, backing up as the Cyclops grabbed air. I'm his son, too. He won't play favorites.
I want to say Percy Jackson's a slight idiot, because I'm sure that...
He's a slight idiot.
There might be some slight favoritism. You might not realize it, but like...
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Percy's got his mom, and Percy did survive last year. Tyson was homeless the entire time, and Polyphemus was blind. Yeah, not the best. It's really interesting when you have, like, this chapter. It's so short, but it's like, yep, they fight, but here are these little things that people don't really pick up on, of having, like, favoritism, and we have all these things. But, of course, Percy and Tyson kind of, like, overtake Polyphemus, but Polyphemus does get the upper hand by destroying the Queen's Anne's revenge, and my favorite line in this chapter is, I didn't know boats can sink that fast.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Can we just... Okay, like, I'm really, really fed up with Clarice. Like, her big mouth has gotten them into so much trouble. It drove me crazy. Like, finally, Polyphemus's eye is completely clouded. He could hardly see anything.
Because Percy Jackson jumps onto his eye.
He jumps onto
His
his
poor
eye.
It makes me hurt just thinking
the only
about it.
the only way in which Polyphemus is able to accurately throw boulders at them is to sort of echolocate or like sort of zero in on the noise that they're making to try and figure out where they're standing. And that's why he's trying not to talk. And then Clarice, ever the showboater, because that's kind of her fatal flaw, is hubris for sure. She's, I mean, like, daughter of Ares, like, really into, like, just being, like, warlike and mocking people, whatever. So then, well, I mean, I'll just read the passage. I summoned up a current to carry us, and we started gaining speed. I was beginning to think we might make it to the ship when Clarice shouted from the deck, "Yeah, Jackson, in your face, Cyclops!" "Shut up," I wanted to yell. "Roar!" Polyphemus picked up a boulder. He threw it toward the sound of Clarice's voice, but it fell short, narrowly missing Tyson and me. Yeah, Clarice taunted. "You throw like a wimp. Teach you to try and marry me, you idiot."
You know what, B? I've told you my secret confession that I actually really enjoy Clarice as a character.
I mean, she's hilarious, but it's so aggravating. Then it's like, "Clarice," I yelled.
Well, that's kind of the point. It's like you can't just have the simple thing of just having the characters get away. They sail off to new lands like One-Eyed Willie's treasure. You can't have that. You need to have Clarice. You need to have some type of thing. It's like, well, how are they going to get out of this one? Which turns out to be Percy Jackson and Tyson go down with the ship.
I mean, the literal reason that Queen Anne's Revenge gets hit by the boulder is because of this moment. Because literally, like, moments after, "Clarice," I yelled, unable to stand it. "Shut up." Too late. Polyphemus threw another boulder, and this time I watched helplessly as it sailed over my head and crashed through the hull of the Queen Anne's Revenge. That, like, it's specifically her with her big mouth. Like, oh my god.
Well, I mean, specifically, it is her fault, but you gotta remember, this is also her quest. So, of course, things are gonna happen where it's like, of course, things are gonna get derailed. My prediction was, because I couldn't remember what happens, because I can't remember what I had for breakfast today, was, there's also the separate ship they had from the Birmingham. Like, they'll use that ship, but rather than as the ship sinking and all that stuff, all the hippocampus, like, swarm up, and they're all saved.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of knew that. I like how you forget for a second that Tyson also has the Son of Poseidon power of communicating underwater in their brains, I guess. It's sort of like what Percy had heard before from water spirits, but instead it's them using, like, this, I don't know, intercom of the water. Yeah, the most whimsically hilarious line in this chapter is, "I nodded, then closed my eyes and concentrated, adding my voice to Tyson's, 'Rainbow, we need you.'" Like, the most Care Bears scene you could possibly have in a Percy Jackson book.
I've seen the first Care Bears movie where they're sailing on a ship defeating the devil, and they all combine their magical...
What?
Yes, the devil is in the Care Bears movie. Is it that one or the second one? I can't remember. But quintessentially, like, evil... And all the Care Bears, like, cross the streams and make a super rainbow.
Oh, kind of like in Ghostbusters.
In their gigantic floating pirate sailboat of the clouds. This is an actual movie.
I mean, it shouldn't be, but...
I have a younger sister. I've seen the Care Bears movie.
I'm really sorry. Yeah, but it's a very Care Bears kind of situation.
It's almost the same situation when you have here of, again... Clarice is arrogant, and she does all this stuff, and they sink, and you have the part, it's like they actually do get away because nobody sinks, and you have them all swimming away past the island, and now they are safe. Yes, so the chapter kind of ends with Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase kind of like snuggling up underneath the Golden Fleece as Rainbow takes him to new lands. B, what is the name of the next chapter?
The name of the next chapter is Chapter 17. We get a surprise on Miami Beach. Oh, wow, that's... all right.
Oh, no, it's spring break.
Oh, no. Yeah, I've never been to Miami, actually.
I've only been to Orlando.
Yeah, I've been to Orlando, too. And a few places in Florida, but not Miami.
I'm sure if I went to Miami, the only thing that would end up happening is me just staying in the hotel room doing nothing, whereas I look at the beach and people are just hanging out and having parties.
Yeah, I can't think of Miami without thinking of the Golden Girls podcast theme song, which is just the B. Arthur weird song that she makes about Miami has so much appeal, a great place to get a seafood meal. That's kind of all I know about it other than spring break.
The only reason why I like would consider going to Florida because it is just nightmare capital of like weather is because of Disney World and the Wizarding World. Otherwise, it is just a gigantic swamp that is just constantly sinking into the water.
Literally, Sarah was just lamenting leaving this morning to go back to Florida because she's just like, I don't want to go back to the place that's filled with all these annoying retirees and the red tide and there's dead fish washing up on the shore. Like, it's a real ecological mess.
Well, so if you're going to Florida, it's either you're newlyweds or nearly deads.
That's true. You're right.
There you go. I've just solved Florida's problem for you. But what do you think is going to happen when they get to Miami, B? I don't think they're going to be meeting Tom Selleck.
A surprise. Luke? I guess he's the only one that they could encounter.
Oh, do you think he's gonna like pop up on the beach like they swim up and he's just like vacationing? Like, oh, this is really awkward. Oh man, he's got like his like tan, like ugh, I'm gonna like throw up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like either they're gonna encounter Luke. I don't think Tantalus, because I think he's still back at the camp taking care of everything. Yeah, there's still so much to wrap up, even though that they got the fleece and they dealt with Polyphemus. There's still everything to do with Talia's tree. We still need to reckon with the whole Kronos thing and the creepy sarcophagus, and we need to deal with Mr. Brunner, who maybe is gonna die because he can't work as like a tutor anymore. There's a lot happening.
I mean, there's a lot of things, but also you got to remember, B, this is book 2 of 5, so maybe things might get answered, maybe things might not get answered. There's some things. Like, what do you think, once they get to Miami, now they have the problem of they have to, like, get to New York, or at least Long Island. They are on the East Coast, but they're, like, as south as it gets.
And that, I mean, it's faster if you take a plane, but again, the whole Zeus thing, not the best to take a plane.
Maybe there's, like, a truce now. Maybe Percy and Zeus are like, yeah, cool, you can go in the air for a little bit.
I'm not sure exactly if that would still be okay or not. Yeah, I hope they see Chiron. That would be cool. I kind of miss him as a character because we haven't really seen much of him.
So now in my mind, when they meet him, he's going to have like a Hawaiian shirt. He's going to have lei on, and he's just like listening to like, what is it, like Dean Martin some more?
Yeah. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next chapter. Now that you reminded me about Chiron, I feel like they're going to probably run into him. I hope that that's the surprise, like it's a positive surprise, because that could, again, mean anything. Like a surprise could be positive or negative or a mixture of the two. There's still a lot of characters that they could encounter and like have a conflict with, because Polyphemus wasn't the only antagonist of this book. There's a lot of antagonists going on. There's at least 4.
Also, there's one more thing that you're kind of forgetting, B, and I just remembered right now.
What?
Clarice never told her what her prophecy was.
Ah, the prophecy. There's so much going on, really. There's a lot of plot threads.
Yeah, there's some stuff going on. Like, I forgot about that. It's like, wait, Clarice never told her what her prophecy was.
Well, you kind of end up like Percy in some ways, where we go along on this journey and you get like kind of myopic. No pun intended about the Cyclopses. But you hyper focus on the fact that they have to get the Golden Fleece and they have to save Grover. Which is luckily a sort of like a twofold like quest. They need to save Grover and they also need to get the Golden Fleece to fix Talia's tree. Now they need to get to New York, which is a whole thing.
Like normally when you have most like young adult or like teen fiction where you have they get the thing, they usually do like a time skip of them just getting back. Here it's a little different. It's like, wait, we have the thing, but we still have to get back. Because again, usually like, again, we're going to look at like rising action. Normally, rising action would be getting the fleece, and then there would be like a downward turn. Like, I'm looking at this as a graph. I'm doing all hand signs now. But like, typically, you would have to have like, the turn to normalcy again, because you'd have already reached the denouement.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how this book is going to wrap up, because obviously there's so many threads going on. I don't think they're going to totally solve the whole thing with Kronos or Luke anytime soon, because I think that's kind of one of the main overarching conflicts going on.
Well, it can also be like one of those things where it's like you kind of tease what's happening over there. It's almost like you see him for the chapter and then he leaves. Yeah,
it's also like way too broad of a conflict to be resolved in the second book, because it's, you know, it's Kronos. He's like he's superior even to the gods. So if he were to come back to life and like team up with Luke and take over the way that they planned, then that would imply like a whole big like raising of the stakes that I don't think that the book would make sense narratively if they shoved more details about that into this narrative. There's already so much happening. So I definitely think that we're maybe just going to more focus on the Tantalus stuff because they need to get back to the camp anyway, and they need to deal with Talia's tree, and that has a lot to do with Tantalus, who's like taking advantage of the fact that the camp is in chaos and that the thing about Talia's tree was blamed on Chiron. So all of that stuff I think might be the main like ending of the book, like tying up those loose threads while leaving the Luke Chrono stuff to like later on.
Yeah, because normally when you have like big books like this, like I remember looking at a book like Cirque du Freak where they have the big bad, but they only mention him maybe 7 books in, like slightly. And I'm like, oh, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. Then when it happens, it's like, oh, there you go. Like sometimes like it's good to have like that little bit of like of a seed and like kind of let it blossom rather than having you meet the enemy and then at the end of the book you meet them again and it's like the super gigantic like climactic battle and then nothing gets resolved. And it's like, I'll get you next time.
There's definitely going to be some sort of cliffhanger situation, I think, at the end of this book because like inherently, even if they follow up on the Luke Chrono stuff just a little bit, it would obviously inherently be a cliffhanger, just sort of hint at the stuff to come.
Oh, do you think it's going to be like Luke comes back? He's like, I'm good now. I was just brainwashed.
Yeah, that would be really funny.
Or do you think it's going to be like they're going to like throw like a monkey wrench or something into the mix?
Yeah. I mean, because magic exists in this universe, like literally like any kind of weird apparition could appear. He could see Luke, he could have a dream about Luke, he could have a dream about Kronos. That was like a whole plot point in the first book, is that Percy kept having nightmares about what was happening with the gods. So I could see a lot happening as far as him understanding that there was still evil afoot, but not really getting the full picture of the plan. We know that Luke wants to reanimate Kronos to get back at the gods for their petty squabble. It's kind of not the clearest thesis of what he believes in. Also, I keep forgetting that Camp Half-Blood is divided now because people are starting to kind of believe the stuff he's saying, because we heard some of the campers on the boat.
Maybe, because again, we've already established that Rick Riordan might have like a history, like love man crush on the Civil War.
That was maybe a bit of foreshadowing in some ways, that we see a civil war ship, because now there's like the internal strife of the demigods taking different sides, and then
there's also possibly a spy in the mix.
Yeah, there's all sorts of traitors and people like listening, and you can't really trust anyone except for maybe the main 3. But also, I think...
Well, I mean, wouldn't that would be almost oddly convenient if one of them was a spy.
Yeah. That would be so messed up if one of them ended up being, like, on the side of Luke. I would suspect Clarice, because she's always been a tenuous ally of them to begin with. But, like, that might be, like, a bait-and-switch thing. Like, the most hurtful would probably be Annabeth, just because that's like or like Grover too. Like there's a lot of people actually who could.
Well, I feel like we could easily like do like a dossier of like, well, you have good old Grover who's looking for Pan, and Pan has gone missing because of how terrible humans have been polluting the earth. Then you have Annabeth, who has, she loves Luke. Like they've already established this through her vision. That's who she wants to be with.
That's true. And it would hurt a lot if she betrayed Percy. But she also has like weird, like as it stands even in this book, her allyship is weirdly earned. Like she doesn't always agree with Percy because she has this whole thing with Tyson. So obviously, I mean, she learned the error of her ways mostly in this book, but you don't know exactly what she's thinking. And she has like all of this trauma about what happened with Talia and blaming herself. And that might make her act out in ways you wouldn't expect. And then I guess there's Tyson, which I don't suspect Tyson.
So when you have a spy, wouldn't it be someone you would least suspect?
Yeah, but I feel like he wouldn't be the greatest spy.
Hey, just imagine like Tyson like goes to Percy. Hey, Percy, so I'm spying on you. Am I doing a good job being a spy?
Yeah, exactly. Like he's too earnest, and like would definitely accidentally break the concept of a secret. Like he wouldn't be able to sort of hold that in his mind. But also at the same time, he does have that weird power of being able to project people's voices, which can be used to like that's how they like eavesdrop on Luke when they're on the cruise ship. So I don't know. There's a lot going on. It's really hard to guess the exact trajectory of the book because there's a lot of plot threads. There's a lot of characters who could change at any moment depending on like there's weird political stuff going on based on their loyalty toward their godparent, their loyalty toward the camp, their loyalty toward humankind.
There's like the overlying thing as well of just having everyone wants to oppress each other, and also it's the idea of apparently there's this gigantic prophecy about something when someone gets of a certain age.
Yeah, the prophecy is something I always forget, but which I shouldn't because it is predicting the plot of the rest of the book, or at least is sort of a sneakily phrased statement that might indicate something that's going to happen. Like, again, prophecies are always like weirdly double speak that you don't exactly know what it implies.
Yeah, but it's also the idea of like you'll usually know when it is, when it's too late. But the great thing about these books is, you know, we get this up front, so we don't have to worry about it, like, right at the end when they threw the monkey wrench in. Like, well, this was predicted since you were born, I'm so sorry, and Percy Jackson.
Yeah, the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Even though in Harry Potter it's a little different, and it is yes and it is no at the same time, because little did they know everyone was wrong. But that's kind of like what I really enjoy about Percy Jackson is, again, it's just honesty. Like, you have like the humbleness of everyone's honest with each other. You have the idea of there's the prophecies, which you know is pretty much the future. So you kind of can interpret it your own way. So as you're reading, the little kid can have his own fan theories and kind of like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Then the prophecy veers off to like the weird way. And I think it also works conveniently for a podcast as well. I mean, for us, it's just like, ooh, what does that mean, B? Ooh, what does this mean? I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot to come in the coming chapters. We're on chapter 17 now. How many chapters
22
are in the book? 22. So we're getting there.
We're almost there. We're almost done with this book, and then we can get on to the third book, which out of all of them, I've told this before, I think, is that the first one's my absolute favorite, and then the Titan's Curse is my second favorite.
I feel like once in a million years when we're done with these books, I'll look back on them and try to see what my favorite is or if I have any new insight, because I'm sure that even, you know, rereading The Lightning Thief after all is said and done will be like a weird perspective, actually knowing the characters and the plot or the basic premise. Really, I really came into this blind.
Well, then you sit there on Half-Blood Hill. We'll actually go to like Montauk and like really like dissect this and really think about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what happens in this book. That's only one plot point closed, but there's so much else that needs to happen.
So, B, did we get any messages this week?
Okay, so yeah, we did get a message from Sam, who says, "Hi, I'm Sam, and I discovered your podcast about a month ago, and I caught up a couple days ago. I'm so excited because I have been listening to podcasts for a while now, and this is the first Percy Jackson podcast I have found. My friends say that I'm a child of Athena, and that is also what I got on the quiz, but I think I'm a child of Poseidon. Keep going, I love this. I hope you get to Magnus Chase. Bye, Sam." Succinct, good, a very nice message.
Oh, thanks so much, Sam. I really appreciate that. So I got an email from Chloe. "Dear Zack and B, here are some stuff I thought it would be interesting. Perseus means to destroy. Cerberus was originally named," I'm going to try to pronounce this and it's going to be butchered, so it's Kerberos, 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 meaning spotted. So the reason Percy loves blue food is because of the absolute petty move of his mom made. Okay, so because Percy Jackson's petty, he likes blue food because he wants to get at the man formerly known as Gabe, who may or may not be missing. So if you know who Gabe Ugliano is, please contact.
Mm-hmm. He's definitely not a lawn statue or anything.
Except, I did get this thing off Etsy. It says man statue, so I bought it. It's currently, I'm using it as a bird feeder.
Man statue. His arms are outstretched and you just put some birdseed in there.
So, more from Chloe. When people die, they stay dead, and the only reason Sally came back was because she was captured. I hope you found this interesting, and I'm sorry I sent you so much stuff, but you guys are my muses. Love, Chloe. P.S. Remember how that godly parent quiz said that Zack was a hunter of Artemis? The hunters only accept females, so I'm not judging.
Yeah, they kind of messed up there. Whoops.
Actually, this is going to be me like putting on my nerd glasses. Apparently, in the new book in the not the Percy Jackson series, but the Trials of Apollo, I guess they answered that question that men can be in the Hunters of Artemis. And also, I think that's actually like a thing, like in Greek mythology, like there can be men in the Hunters of Artemis, but only under special circumstances.
Yeah.
But I haven't read any of those Apollo books yet, so I don't know.
I don't know either. I know even less. We got a message from Evan who says, "Thank you for doing the godly parentage test." Well, a lot of that in this listener correspondence. "I did the test and got Athena. Thank you for being so funny on the show." Thank you for being funny, Zach.
Aw, thanks.
We try to be funny.
I think we're both funny. So we have an email from 2B Pencil. "Hi, Zack and B. It's me again. I knew you guys are still in the second Percy Jackson Olympians, but I am wondering what would be your choice for the next series. Would you go straight into Heroes of Olympus, or maybe changing things up a bit and do the King Chronicles or Magnus Chase? The reason I ask is because I have just finished the King Chronicles, and I really love it. It would be amazing to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions on it soon. Anyway, happy Halloween in advance, and I hope you both had fun in New York City." We did have fun in New York City.
We ate a lot of Italian food. It was delicious.
Yes. Before we go into that tirade, because we'll probably have like a talk about it a little bit, I don't think we've decided what we're going to do after Percy Jackson. We're just going to...
Yeah.
All we're doing right now is focusing on Percy Jackson, because it's going to take us like another 6 years to finish these books.
Jeez.
And then after that, we're going to have to figure out, like... That will be like, if we do any of those series, it's going to be like another like 12 years. So by the time we finish, both of us are going to be like in our like late 80s.
Yeah, it's going to go for a while. I kind of not even sure if podcast will exist by the time we get to some of those books.
Well, when we get to some of those books, you see everyone just takes a pill that has the episodes on it. It's like a complete transfer.
That's true. Or like you get real Clockwork Orange and your just eyes get sort of stretched open and you must watch the state-sponsored TV.
Yeah, that might be what happens. So keep tuned for that. But to answer the question about good old New York City, it was a lot of fun. We got to hang out. It was really weird, like I said. Like normally when I record, like I usually have my eyes closed, so I pretend that B is sitting right next to me. But like in this case, I had my eyes opened and B was talking to me, and it was really weird because I'm so used to just hearing their voice and not seeing like their face bones move. And I'm like, oh no, this is real weird.
My face bones. Ooh, that sounds horrible. When we were sitting in the... I think I mentioned this last episode, actually, when we recorded live, that we were like sitting in the living room talking about movies, and then Sarah like heard us in the other room, and it sounded like an episode of Radio Camp Half-Blood. It was just like our disembodied voices riffing on something.
Oh yeah, because we were watching Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Yeah,
we were. We watched a lot of weird movies. Yeah.
Which we watched a lot of movies. I'm so sorry. We watched so many movies.
No, I enjoyed all of them. I had a fun time.
What did we watch? We watched The Disaster Artist. We watched Ready Player One. Halloween 3. We watched Elvira, Mistress of the Darkness.
And Be Kind Rewind. Halloween Town.
Oh yeah, that was the one where me and Sarah, shout out to Sarah, we had a lot of giggle water.
Yeah, Halloween Town. Yeah, just coming up with headcanons.
Oh yeah, no, I wish we had that recorded, because it was like, we were coming up with like fan theories, even though we've seen these movies a bunch of times. We're just like, I can't even remember half the conversations we had. Do you, B?
Oh, yeah, it was a weird time. I scarcely see either of you, so.
And then on Saturday, we went to New York City, which for me was like a little kid going to New York City for the first time. And I'm sure your sister and you can attest for that.
Yeah, I kept like being a little worried that you were going to be like Sweet Pea from Popeye and just wander into construction site or something. I was just a little stressed about the scenario. Like, oh God, Zach.
No, but there was like times where I lost you guys because I was like looking up or was doing things. Like I was like, so this is how a subway works? Wow. It was almost like an Elf, almost.
Yeah, it was very much like Elf. It's like, buddy, don't eat the gum. It's not free.
Like, for me, I was just imagining, like, I'd see, like, a sign that says world's best cup of coffee. It's going, wow, congratulations, world's best cup of coffee. You did it. And the one thing I have to say that's negative about New York City is it was like $60 to get up to the Empire State Building.
Oh, yeah. Well, everything's expensive in New York City, and everyone just kind of accepts it. It's really weird. You just kind of, you go to Manhattan, and they're like, that'll be $40 for a bottle of water. And you're like, why? And because it's Manhattan. And you're like, okay, here, take my money.
Other
like,
than that, we went to a couple museums. We hung out. We went to a lot of places. That was fun. We went to Obscura, which was fun. I was like, you can't see this, everybody, but you know the meme of, like, I was this close to, like, losing my mind? Like, super close, of buying, like, an actual human bone.
Yeah, you almost bought a bone. That would have been hard to explain. That would have been such a funny, like, plunder of goods when you went back to LA. It would just be your bag of bagels and your bone that you purchased. Though you forgot the bagels at the airport.
Well, I would have had to have mailed the bone because I don't think I can actually bring the bone on an airplane trip.
Yeah. That would be hard to explain to TSA.
And then afterwards, we went to, like, the most adorable Italian restaurant, which was, like, as, like, not stereotypical Italian, but it was, like, I felt like I, like, walked into, like, a sitcom that takes place in an Italian restaurant.
It did feel that way, especially because there was, like, a leak in the ceiling, so there was, like, water dripping down. I, like, knew my dad is friends with the guy who runs it, Frank. You guys should go to it, seriously. If you live in the city, go to, in Greenwich Village, Gaetana's. The guy Frank who owns it is like the nicest man in the world, and is always like gives us the whole grand tour every time we go there. Like brings out plates of food that we didn't even order, whatever. It was pretty great.
Oh yeah, then that happened. Like I didn't believe them, and then it happened.
Yeah, it truly did happen. We finally had ate dinner, and then when it came time for dessert, they brought out the dessert menus, and he appears, Frank, the very hilarious Italian man, like hovers over us, sees that we have the dessert menus, like, oh, you want dessert? I'll get you dessert, and just grabs the menus away, and Zach's jaw just dropped onto the ground. He just grabs the menus and then, like, appears, like, moments later with a giant hunk of cake for us.
And the expression on my face apparently was priceless.
Yeah, it was really funny. You looked so shocked. It was a great time.
Oh, it was so much fun. And then, like, I slept on the train. And then, like, most of the time we just hung out. We did a bunch of things, like, in town. We went on a couple adorable lakes. We went to a dollar store where I found Star Wars Episode 1 Sebulba and Boss Nass masks, which I was tempted to buy.
Good thing you didn't buy them. I thought you were for a second. I'm like, that's not a good investment.
No, it is a good investment. I don't know when I'm going to ever need them.
You never know. Yeah, it was a weird week.
It was a weird week, but it was fun. And then afterwards, like the last day, we went to this place called Stu Leonard's where I was so happy. So for people in LA, just imagine you combine Disneyland with a Whole Foods.
Yeah, Disneyland with a Whole Foods, exactly. It's a lot like that. A little less bougie than that, I would say, than a Whole Foods.
And it was so magical, and I got some rainbow bagels, and I got some unicorn bagels.
Yeah, those were really good. I hadn't tried those ones before, but the unicorn bagel was delicious.
Yes, made from 100% real unicorn. So
Yeah, that good stuff. You can only get that in New York City. It was actually in Connecticut. The store's in Connecticut.
Well, B, I hate to tell you this now that you've tasted unicorn blood. You now live a half-life, a cursed life.
A cursed life. Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm so young looking.
Oh, from all the unicorn bagels?
Yeah. I'm just gonna look like this forever. I went to go vote, and the woman at the polling place was like, I should ID you. You look too young to vote. And I was like, I'm not. And then she said, so you're 18? And I said, I'm 25. And she looked gobsmacked that I said that. I might as well have said I was 85.
Yep. All I do every morning is I go outside, go to the Fountain of Youth, and I just take a little sip. But yeah, it was so much fun to hang out with B. I'm so sorry that we've gotten this tirade while doing, listener messages, but it was so much fun. I got choked up. I really wish like we could have spent more time together, like maybe like an extra couple days. But it was fun. I got to hang out with Sarah, where it was so much fun because like it was just like talking to myself, but as a different person.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was a lot of things packed into as many days. I think I need a break after this month because it's you visited, Sarah visited, and my friend Stacy visited all within a few weeks of each other. And I was also did 2 separate Halloween parties because I'm insane. Yeah, it was just a very tiring but good month filled with friendship and activities. This happens every October. I always am like, I'll be fine. I can do a million things at once and put up every possible Halloween decoration in the world, and then I am tired for all of November, which is good because then I hibernate for November and then emerge from my Christmas chrysalis and become a Christmas elf and make 1,000 cookies.
And I'm going to eat all those cookies because that is my way. And you know what I do for Christmas, B? I snuggle up with the biggest fantasy book that I could possibly find and just read until Christmas is over. And then I emerge as the Grinch.
I'll fix your Grinchiness. There will be many cookies procured.
So we did get 2 iTunes reviews. Do you want to read the first one, B?
Yes. It's a pretty short one. It just says, from D-Dog, it says, "Lol, you guys are funny, and I like your discussions. You are cool." Upside down smiley face.
I love that.
Yeah, I love how succinct that is. It's really great.
So we got one more, and it says, Iris message. "This has been such a great podcast. I found it a week ago, and I have been binging ever since. I've really enjoyed hearing about children's literature from a literary point of view since they are so often disconnected as not being genuine literature. B and Zach, you guys are great hosts, and I can't wait to hear more from you. Thank you."
Yeah, that's kind of like the main gist of a lot of the reviews we get is a lot of people don't seem to interrogate children's literature beyond like it's popular, it's fun. There are some through lines that are very similar between a lot of these books that were, popular through the mid-2000s.
Well, also it's like the idea of like saying that children's literature is lesser literature is almost stupid. And I'll say that with certainty because if anyone has ever tried to write a book, no matter what genre it is, writing's a lonely business, and it takes as much skill as writing like one of those books where it's like, Timothy sat down at a coffee table and drank tea and looked at the leaves and contemplated his life.
I definitely think in some ways children's literature can do a better job of like examining things like the human condition, because a lot of times adult novels are written with a certain like self-serious approach where it's like, I'm going to write the great American novel. I'm going to speak to all of these complicated emotional things. And I think by trying to get at like the root of like relatable human stuff without getting too, I guess, cerebral, children's literature oftentimes like expresses like really meaningful things in more like digestible, accessible ways, which is why I like it so much.
Well, for me, what I like about it is for me, I'm a huge like fantasy reader, is that I think when you have, I would consider Percy Jackson to be very like urban fantasy or, YA fantasy, is that with fantasy, you can actually like do things that wouldn't logically happen. And you can like, your brain like works in a much different, more creative way. As well as when it comes to a lot of kids' books, those are the books that people are really going to remember, such as like remembering movies and stuff. It's actually, I have to find this article because it was really interesting. Did you know that a lot of the things that you consider your favorite movies are usually movies you saw when you were about 12 to 13?
That makes a lot of sense because it's your formative years.
Those are the ones that like stick with you. So like if you read Percy Jackson or you fall in love with a particular thing at a certain age, it will carry throughout your entire life. And it makes sense because for me at 13, all the stuff that I still love now, such as, trauma movies, such as horror movies, Die Hard, like Back to the Future, like movies that I watched growing up are now things that like they're kind of like the embodiment of what I enjoy in life, and kind of like those are like my gold standards. It's very fascinating, especially when you have a series like Percy Jackson that just keeps going on and on and on with so many other books.
It goes on. Well, what I was going to say was it influences your perspective on things, and I think that is why I appreciate Rick Riordan so much, is because, like we said earlier, he really thinks about what he's writing and the audience that may be reading his words, because you're influencing like children's formative years. The people who are growing up, they're going to read Percy Jackson and they're going to like internalize a lot of the things that are said in it. So it's important to teach important lessons, and that's kind of why a lot of children's literature sometimes is too didactic, where it's very like, this is how to be a good person, let's mind our manners or whatever.
Well, no, it's like a lot of the times, like if you want to have that, like you could read like things like, I'll just use the example of Chronicles of Narnia, which is pretty much like, black and gray, cats and dogs, everything's living in harmony, but there's good and evil. You can have stuff like that. Like here, when you look at like Percy Jackson or a lot of kids' books, there's a lot of like gray level characters where it's like you don't know if they're good or bad, or like what is good, what is bad. Like you actually, as a kid, you don't understand it, but then once you read it as an adult, like you've already had these ideas in your brain for so many years. And it's, all thanks to a man who's like, I'm going to go help my son. So I'm going to make this weird, wacky series where we have cyclopses and we have hummus and we have all these things. And you learn about it in a very fun, constructive way. And to say that, most of the literary community doesn't believe in like kids' books or like lesser books because they're the ones that make the most money. Harry Potter, Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, they're super popular now. I mean, Harry Potter did a great service to the industry of YA in a lot of ways. I mean, it did produce a lot of like weird copycats and like people trying to follow in their footsteps and maybe less originality to some extent, but also it like gave some air of legitimacy to it, which I think is important. Well,
also it's like the idea now of all the people that read Harry Potter growing up are now publishing books themselves. So now you're seeing like a new influx. Like I would predict we're in like a renaissance of like fantasy books. I can see that we're in like a renaissance of like children's literature, young adult literature, because now the kids that are growing up that read Series of Unfortunate Events, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, all these things are now writing books and getting them published themselves.
Yeah. YA is incredibly lucrative and popular right now.
Like some of the most highest grossing properties are fantasy and young adult books.
Yeah. I keep thinking, I just had a conversation with Sarah about this, about how Harry Potter has like such a ripple effect on the literary world that we live in today, not just like YA, but even you think about how Twilight started as like a semi like Harry Potter self-insert Mary Sue fanfic thing that then got changed slightly into a vampire book, and then that became 50 Shades of Grey. Like it's so funny how even books that aren't for children have sort of grown out of Harry Potter. Like it had such a ripple effect.
Well, because you have to like remember, at that time there was nothing like Harry Potter, and I remember it was like every time I think like a kid's book of the year came up, Harry Potter would win, to the point of where J.K. Rowling's like, I'm not going to submit my next book for consideration because it's almost like a monopoly. Like you have like these things, it's like it's almost like unheard of to have like a book that the author has made billions of dollars off of the book alone rather than merchandising. Like even George Lucas made most of his money off merchandising than Star Wars.
Luckily, J.K. Rowling, she got a lot of book sales and a lot of merchandising. She kind of had the best of both worlds.
Well, interesting thing enough is that there is a lot of Harry Potter merchandise, but we're getting a lot of it now. Like way back in the day, it was very sparse compared to what it is now. There was some movie, I could talk about this all day. There was some movie merchandise, but a lot of it wasn't as like to the extent that we have now. It's almost like bloated. Like I can get like a Hufflepuff like car if I wanted to.
Well, they used to not even really sell those two houses. Or like Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff weren't even really popular motifs.
No, it was all Gryffindor.
Gryffindor or Slytherin were the two.
But now there's everything, and we could easily talk about this. And for me as a collector, because I love collecting things, Could we get some more Percy Jackson collectibles? Just a little bit? Like high-grade collectibles. That's all I'm asking for. Not even Funko Pops. I'm like, maybe some PVC figures. Maybe like, I'd like a replica of like Riptide. Like a actual like nice heavy die cast.
Oh, I was researching a way to make a replica of Riptide because I wanted to be possibly Percy for this Halloween. I might do it next year. I don't know. It would be pretty easy. I just need the t-shirt, but the main thing would be getting a sword that looked like Riptide.
Yeah, and there's also not like an official t-shirt. You have to go on like Etsy and all that stuff to really
Right, yeah,
one.
or like Redbubble is where you would get like a Camp Half-Blood t-shirt.
That's another episode just like merchandising. Like I want it, but I guess it makes sense because there's not really like a show or anything that you could add merchandise.
There was a terrible series of movies. Well, 2 movies.
Well, 2 movies. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be getting some news soon for a Percy Jackson series for that new Disney Plus.
Oh, right, the new streaming service they have.
I would imagine if they want to do something because they're putting all their eggs in their basket.
Terrible idea, but you know.
Oh no, I think it's a great idea because people are gonna buy it. Because if you want your catalog of like Star Wars and Disney stuff, you go right there.
I wouldn't. I'm already paying for way too many streaming services as it is.
Oh, I'm going to. I'm not paying for CBS Access. I'll pay for Disney Plus because I'm an idiot and I really, really want to see
because
their
I'm an
options for
idiot.
movies. Yeah, that's the new slogan: Disney Plus, because I'm an idiot.
And then it just like 2 mouse ears get drawn on your head.
That's already happened, B. But I think that kind of like wraps up the show a little bit. Where can they find you, B?
Yeah, I think it does. You can find me on Twitter at bkellygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41, that's SUDA41. And if you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. If you want to email our show, you can email us at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Patreon at Patreon/radiocamphalfblood. Donating some money helps go back to the show. Get some new mics, get some cool stuff. You'll get some exclusive bonus content, and we have shirts available at tpublic.com. Just type in Radio Camp Half-Blood. Well, I think that's pretty much it. And any advice you want to give back to the kids back home, B?
Advice? Stay mortal?
Yeah, that's some good advice. I was gonna say like, don't yell at a cyclops when it's blind and throwing rocks at you.
There's a lot of lessons we could have learned from this episode.
I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye!
Bye, guys.